The ground is shaking. You feel it before you hear it. Up through the horse, up through the steel wrapped around your body. 40 other riders move beside you. A wall of iron and muscle and thundering hooves. Ahead of you stand men who are about to die, or to kill you first. You lower your lance. You dig in your spurs. And half a ton of horse, armor, and sharpened steel begins to move as one. You are a medieval knight, and almost everything you have been told about you is a fairy tale. When we picture a knight, we picture a hero. Shining armor, a noble heart, a code of honor called chivalry. A man who protects the weak, rescues the innocent, and fights only for what is right. The reality is harder and far more interesting. You are not a storybook hero. You are the single most expensive, most lethal weapon of your entire age. A professional killer, bred and built for violence from childhood. And that beautiful word, chivalry, does not mean quite what you think it means. Let's start with how you were made. Because you were not born a knight. You were manufactured into one, over almost 20 years. It began when you were around 7 years old, taken from your family, sent to another noble's household, and put to work as a page, learning manners, service, and the first handling of a blade. By about 14, you became a squire, bound to a working knight. You carried his armor, tended his horses, and followed him onto the battlefield, watching men die up close long before you were ever allowed to fight yourself. Only at around 21, after all those years, were you finally dubbed a knight. 14 years of training to make one man. And the training was only the start of the cost, because a knight is not simply a soldier. A knight is a one-man war machine, and someone has to pay for it. Think about what you need. Armor, made by hand, whether rings of mail or, in later centuries, fitted plates of steel. A sword, a lance, a shield. A squire and servants to maintain it all. And above everything, the warhorse. Not a farm animal, but a destrier. A beast bred and trained for battle, strong enough to carry you and all your steel straight into a charge. A single warhorse could cost more than most people earned in years of labor. This is the secret hiding behind the shining armor. Knighthood was never only about courage. It was about money. Only the wealthy, the landholding class, could afford to put a man in the field like this. The armor did not just protect you, it announced that you belonged to a different world than the peasant in the mud below. And that armor was not the clumsy iron shell of legend. A full suit of plate weighed only around 20 to 25 kilograms, spread evenly across your whole body. You could run in it, mount a horse in it, rise from the ground in it. The idea that a knight had to be craned onto his horse is a myth invented centuries later. Now, that famous code, chivalry. It was real. It rose in the 12th century, a set of ideals about honor, loyalty, courage, and the protection of the weak. The church itself pushed it hard, desperate to aim all this trained violence somewhere useful, and away from its own doors. But here's the part the legends leave out. In practice, chivalry was mostly a code for how knights treated other knights. If you beat a noble enemy on the battlefield, you did not kill him, you captured him. Because a captured lord could be ransomed for an enormous sum. Mercy was not only honorable, it was profitable. And the common soldiers on the other side, the archers, the spearmen, the peasants dragged into the fight, no one ransomed them. No code shielded them. They were simply killed. The shining honor of chivalry often stopped at exactly the point where the money ran out. So how did a young knight build his name and his fortune? He fought even when there was no war. In the tournament. Forget the gentle, roped-off joust of later centuries. The early tournament was a sprawling, violent mock battle across open country, dozens of knights crashing into one another for real. Men were maimed. Men were killed. But the rewards were enormous, because if you unhorsed and captured an opponent, you took his armor, his horse, and his ransom. One young, landless knight named William Marshall turned this into an empire. He had almost nothing to his name, only skill and nerve. He rode the tournament circuit, defeating and capturing knight after knight, and grew famous across Europe. From that beginning, he rose to serve 5 kings of England and ended his life as one of the most powerful men in the realm. Later ages would call him the greatest knight who ever lived. But William Marshall was the rare exception. For most, the story ended very differently, because there was a darker side to being a walking weapon. What happens to a killer when the war ends? Many knights were younger sons, men who would inherit no land at all. All they truly owned was their skill at violence. And in the long wars of the Middle Ages, when the fighting paused, bands of these unemployed knights and soldiers roamed the countryside as free companies, no longer noble heroes, but armored plunderers, robbing and burning the very villages that men like them had once sworn to protect. And even the fortunate ones lived under a constant shadow. There were no antibiotics. A wound that did not kill you on the field could kill you slowly, days later as it turned rotten. Knights died young, in battles, in tournaments, and in sickbeds of wounds gone bad. So here is the truth beneath the armor. You were not a hero from a storybook. You were the sharpest instrument of a violent world, raised from childhood to kill, funded like a fortune, wrapped in glory, and used again and again, until the day the world had used you up. We began with a peasant, bound to the soil, who feared hunger, then a king, bound to his throne, who feared everyone. And here, standing between them, is the knight, the blade they both depended on. The peasant fed him, the king commanded him, and the knight bled for them both. 3 lives, 1 world, held together by grain and fear and steel. And in the end, it was the steel that outlasted them all. It still sits in our museums, polished and gleaming, long after the men who wore it and feared inside it crumbled into dust.